seeing that address. I just found out that the zoning board has only been sending their referrals to me and that CAB address.
Okay.
And I'm like, what's going on here? That we've been missing a lot of ZBA referrals because I haven't been pushing them on. That's not my role to like push on forward referrals. So we got these referrals. The planning board is pretty good. Gretchen is really good, and she's been sending out the emails to all of us, and she has our updated list. And I just sent that to Chris as well. But if you get access, you should be the CAB. Like as far as if somebody sends an email to CAB, you should be monitoring that.
So Sebastian, what needs to take place? I'm an IT consultant, but I'm not the official IT consultant to the town for the email systems. And so what you want to do is, I think, contact John, the town clerk, John Gautier, and then ask him to put in a ticket with PCA to have the CAB email address forwarded to your private email address. And then anything that hits the CAB inbox will copy to you, but maintain a copy in the CAB mailbox. So if you're ever in town hall and you'll end up with a username and a password, and that email address is your official incoming email address. It should probably be, the email address is CAB, and it probably should be CAB HAPAC or whoever wants to be first.
Okay.
But just the CAB one is what the public knows and the other boards know, and they send emails to that. But yeah, just ask John to put in a ticket with PCA to forward that email address to you, keeping a copy, and that will be solved.
Okay, and John's email is just clerk.
Jay, you can, if you email town clerk, it simultaneously goes to John and Joan. So the clerk and the deputy clerk. That works fine, because if John's not there, Joan will help.
Okay,
great. You probably put your application into him or something when you got the job. To John.
Yeah, I went into town hall yesterday to I think I talked to Sarah Derbyshire, and we did the thing.
Yeah, Sarah works payroll and bookkeeping office.
Okay. So that's one. And I'll introduce Craig since he's with us. Craig is one of our board members. We have Craig, we got George, and myself. This is Sebastian. He's our secretary. We're sharing him with the historic committee.
Mm-hmm.
And we're probably going to use him more. I want to set you up.
Well,
we're going to use him more or abuse him more.
Yeah, exactly.
They both need help, but
we've been long overdue. So if you get those emails, and by the way, it takes 5 of us to have a quorum. So our meetings go unofficial until we actually have a quorum.
Okay.
Then you would be taking minutes, and you would be putting out our minutes. So we haven't had any minutes, and we haven't had any agendas since Sabrina left.
Okay.
And so if any emails came into CAB, sometimes it's emails that's from the state saying there's seminars, that are worthwhile for, advisory boards, and just to disseminate them to the current board members. And we'll have to make sure you have our list. Well, it's on the Zoom invite, right? That's all of our emails.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Mark sends me an email reminding everybody, includes all the members. And then as soon as I see that email, that's when I set up the Zoom codes and I send it right back.
I've been doing that because we haven't had a secretary. Our secretary used to do that, used to remind us. No, our secretary wasn't really good at that. She never did remind us, but it's good to have a reminder. So whoever that, I'll just keep doing that. I've been doing it. That works.
In terms of minutes, when I took them for the Historic Landmarks Preservation Committee, it was very much just like agenda item and then whatever the action was underneath it. Is that kind of what you all are looking for too? Would that work for your purposes?
I don't know if action is like really the term.
Okay.
I guess I think for us, it's just kind of more of a discussion. I think it's kind of a record of our discussion on each project or each issue. I don't know that we take action. We're not an action board. We're just an advisory board.
Okay.
Although we do have a big project that we are in the midst of, and we just had a kickoff of, and that's this NRI project. And we're spearheading that for the town, which is a partnership with the DEC, the Hudson River Estuary Program, and Cornell Cooperative Extension. And they're going to do all this NRI mapping for us. And it's going to be our responsibility to find them all of the maps, local maps that are relative to Rhinebeck, because they got all the state level maps, they got all the wetlands, and they got all that kind of stuff, but things that are specific to Rhinebeck. And they created there's a Google Drive now where we're trying to put the maps, and I'll send that Google Drive out to everybody, so that we can try to find the maps. I heard that there is a lap or a PC or a computer in town hall that's the CAB computer. Supposedly there's maps there. It might be worthwhile, Sebastian. Maybe if you're ever in town hall, maybe you can check that.
I suspect it's in the assessor's office, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I think it's down in the basement. It'll
Yeah,
be
when
down
I
in
was
the
in-
basement somewhere. Yeah.
When I was there,
Yeah.
yeah, they showed me the filing cabinet that was.
we heard about the filing. I know about the filing cabinet. None of us have looked at that filing cabinet since we've been on. And you know what? I'm okay with that because that's the old system, that filing cabinet. I got them to send us all electronic versions of all the submittals. I don't want to go to the filing cabinet every time there's a submittal.
It gave me cold sweats. I was like, I don't know what this contraption is.
Yeah. Sebastian,
Mhm.
there's on the town website, there's a CAB link. And if you go there's a button that says maps, and that directs to somebody's Google Drive, but it's empty. It's their trash. And so somehow getting that button linked to something that you can populate would be really beneficial, because that would be a really good place for us to have all of our maps and resources and things like that. Also, there's a record of old agendas and old minutes, going back to like 2016 or something like that. And you might want to peruse those, just look at a few to get a sense of what's been produced in the past. And that might give you a better sense of what would be acceptable. I mean, what you're talking about is probably just fine. It's supposed to be a public meeting, and we're supposed to have a record of what we say. So just a summary. You don't have to put down every single detail that was discussed. And mostly, we're talking about reports and things like that we've circulated among one another and sent on to the planning board. So there's the report, there will be a record of that. I wouldn't be too spare about it, but just having the agenda item and what was discussed in summary would probably be sufficient.
Perfect. Okay.
It's better than what we have now, which as Mark points out, is nothing.
Yeah, I think that past agendas usually there's a heading for past projects or current projects or future projects. Sometimes it was like past and present projects. That was and then other items. And those projects are really the ZBA and the planning board referrals. Whoops. Somebody.
And this seems similar. I serve on the Kingston Conservation Advisory Council, and so I found the old agendas, and it looks really similar to what we do, new business, old business kind of thing.
Now, the other thing that I just was setting Sabrina up, and she was just starting to get it together when she left, and now we haven't had it for over a year. It was a log. So we haven't a clue, for the whole year, we don't have a log of what's been referred to us and what our action has been, if we actually submitted a report and what the final zoning board or board status was. Did it get approved? Did the project get approved or not? So I'll send you where the log was. There's a gap of about a year. You don't have to fill the gap, but we just started so that we can know, and basically, I think our agenda really ends up being based on that log. What's active? We should be covering all active projects and where they're at.
Also, all of our previous meetings are online.
Oh, the recordings of them?
Yeah.
Our Zooms.
YouTube.
Yeah, that's
You'll be able to see my beard.
hell yeah.
I'm sure he's going to want to see every one of
At least that part of it that was in frame.
I was gonna say, yeah, we gotta have you like lean backwards.
Yeah.
So, right. So there's the minutes, there's the agenda,
And,
the log, and then monitoring the CAB email account. And those are kind of like, I think, kind of wraps up what we essentially need you to do to kind of keep us whole.
You're also doing HAPAC.
yes.
So I've seen them at one of our or maybe two of our site meetings. There have been people there. Is there a lot of activity with that? Have they met? Do they meet every month?
I think they meet every month. I just went to the first meeting. My first meeting with them was on Monday.
Oh, the
Okay.
historic committee.
And there were a couple of decisions that they made. They're going to do a site visit, I think, coming up.
They
They
make
meet once a month on the second Monday. It's always, and the time has changed from, I think, 5 p.m. to 4 p.m. So it's always the 4 p.m. before the first of the month's regular town board meeting. It's always on the same day as the first of the month town board meeting, which is always a Monday.
What kind of decisions do they make?
I guess from this last meeting, it was just they decided they're going to do a walkthrough of a site visit on a certain property. I can't remember what the name of the property was.
Like deciding the date and when to visit it or something.
Yeah, exactly. And who's going to go, keeping track of those sorts of things.
Yeah. So what's been happening is we get these referrals, which keeps us the most occupied through the month. We get referrals from the planning board, from Gretchen.
Okay.
And what we can't wait for the meeting to go over these referrals and then divvy them out, because we lose too much time, and we really have to get the reports in within usually a month, a week before they have the public hearing on each application. So what we've been doing is just whoever steps up. We see the referrals, and we hope that every member tries to pick one up. We didn't get them all last month, but we got a few. And yeah, hopefully we got enough, usually if there's enough members, we had 8 members, everybody should be able to get one. And then that kind of covers it. So, that's when, if you had the log, that's when you'd be populating that log.
Great.
When somebody steps up, it's part of the log. Which member is taking that project? And then when that's submitted, boom, date. It's been submitted to the planning board. Boom, you'll see it, because we're CCing everybody when we get the referrals and we submit our reports. We CC everybody, so you'll see it all. And then that would be your date. Boom, and then it would be nice to be able to work with the planning board and zoning board secretaries to just be able to get the information what's the status of what happens with these applications. Do they get approved? Do they get put off? I don't think they reject things. They don't just out now say no. They'll put it off. They'll complicate it, make it drag it out. They won't, close at the issue. But so it'd be nice to I think we'd like to know what the final outcome of all of these applications are. But then we got the NRI project again, which is getting all these maps together. So if you find any maps, I think I got to look. There's a Google Drive. The David Chernak. David
He was a
Chernak.
student. I do a winter course at Bard, and I remember him from he was a student last 2020.
He did a summer internship or last summer. I guess he did an internship with the town, and he wrote this big report. And now he's been brought on as some sustainability coordinator for, I don't know how long. I think it's at least 6 months.
Cool.
And he's been very helpful for help getting us trying to find maps. We're going to find these maps. So the the comprehensive plan has probably most of the maps that we really need that are really town specific. Where are they? Are we just copying it from the comprehensive plan, or is there a file? If they had a GIS file, that would be the best. Where do we find these maps? That's going to be our thing. And if we don't find them, what will happen is our NRI will not be very Rhinebeck specific. It'll just be, we'll have the wetlands, state stuff. We'll have all the available data that's out there will be compiled into our report, and anything that we don't give them won't be there.
Okay.
If you don't mind me asking, what do you teach at Bard, Sebastian?
We do like it's a weird, they call it the J term. So it's a 2-week long course. And originally it was just water management. I used to live and work in Oaxaca, Mexico. It was water management focused on Oaxaca, Mexico. We've kind of shifted it, and it's trying to figure out what its form is now. And it's really kind of just a class on exploring different forms of land tenure and, I guess, basically like resource ownership and management within communities in the central valleys of Oaxaca, and then also in this mountain range called the Sierra Sur, which is to the south of the major city there.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's been nice, and we work with there are a lot of like my old colleagues that are involved with it, and so it's a lot of people who are kind of out there doing the work, and so it's stepping outside the academic sphere for a bit and allowing them students to really just interact with people who are doing the work, which is nice for them. And it's really fun. Like, traveling is just, as I'm sure we're all like salivating over it, like it's very nice because you get to see a new place and you have new eyes, and so new ideas can permeate a lot more easily. Yeah.
You can't go wrong with water resources, especially drinking water. Everybody's got to drink clean water.
And that's my day job. Is I work with Riverkeeper, and we do water community science and water monitoring. So
you're out on a boat taking water samples?
I wish. No, that's my colleague John Lipton. I work with volunteers, so we have like a complimentary program that's in the tributaries, and so we have like 50 or 60 volunteers who go out and take water samples once a month in 12 different tributaries to the Hudson River.
We got a boat guy and we got a waiter guy.
Mm-hmm. I'm the waiter
boat guy's already taken, so
we need
you get the waiters.
Yeah. One day we'll be the boat guy.
Did I hear you earlier say, do you live in Kingston?
Yeah, and I live in Kingston.
I see. Okay.
Well, just our board, the CAB, is also what do we call it? It's the Water Advisory Council.
Waterfront Advisory Council, yeah.
Waterfront Advisory Council, because town of Rhinebeck has it's called the LWRP, which is a local waterfront revitalization plan.
Totally.
So it's basically to protect the estuary along the Hudson River. It's basically, it's a program so we can protect, and it's so
that's great.
So when you find out that something's spiking along the Hudson or along the Rhinebeck coastline,
we'll let you know.
Shoreline, let us know if there's
Totally.
a spike of something.
Somebody put together a cab guide. It's a 100 and some odd page document, but they helpfully went through and noted all of the relevant pieces for the cab, and I can send you a copy of my copy, and it would be an interesting thing, I think an enlightening thing for you to kind of page through, because it gives a good summary of the things that we're supposed to be engaged in. And
not that we all
yeah, well, I mean, it's there's been a lot of
Greg, this one?
a lot of
whoops.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly.
No,
That's the
totally.
one. Thank you, Fred.
Resource.
And
Robert,
we've been really just kind of reactive to what the town planning board and zoning board put in front of us. But as Mark has mentioned, there are a lot of other things that we're supposed to be involved in, and being aware of that. Mark's been very good about, getting the natural resources inventory up and running, and, making those connections and not missing those opportunities, I think is really helpful, not just for the activities of this board, but, for the health of the community. And, I think we all want to be a part of something that's relevant and does important work and isn't just, a rubber stamp for people's, building plans.
Totally.
Approved.
And I don't know if we're ever going to make a quorum tonight. I looked through my email
so.
and Joe Button is going to
Cole's not
be
gonna make it.
late. And Joe Kupiec said that something came up and he's not going to make it.
Cole's got golf tonight. He's got a golf match. He's on the
So
varsity.
there's no Cole, and I don't even think that Scout is on board yet officially, is
She
she?
is. Yeah, she's official. I don't know why she's not.
Is she out of the hospital?
Yeah, I saw her at a meeting. Yeah, she was at the kickoff meeting for the NRI
Okay.
last week.
But the town board voted her in, and she's
I
on.
believe so. Yeah, I think she's in now.
Okay.
Yeah, because Ed Roberts congratulated her. So
Scott's name is on the town website, so that means John did that, or Joan
Okay.
did that, and that means it's official.
All right. So that means we've only really got one vacancy, right?
Yep.
we got
Okay.
one vacancy in
But I don't think we've had Gabriella appear.
a long time. It's a disappointment. Yeah, Gabby's got to step down.
Yeah.
She's not. I mean, she showed up for the first of the year, and then she's always going to be too busy. She should just accept that and just step down.
I got one question. I don't mean to derail this, but for the incoming emails, you were saying that as soon as I get the email from
Like
the
sooner,
email
like-
address, instantaneously send it over to you all. Just kind of send it to everyone in the group just to make sure everyone can see it and someone will step up. Probably.
Yeah, like the referrals generally are going to all of us, but if they're not, just make sure that just make sure that we all get it. Yeah, just check to see who the original distribution was. If it didn't go to all of us,
Get everyone.
that's probably the way to go.
Yeah. Also, Sebastian, you could also probably have direct access to the Office 365 account for the CAB.
Oh, cool.
You can get to that externally. So if you don't want to have town emails interspersed with your other stuff,
I wouldn't.
and I'm sure that PCA can give you direct access.
I would love that.
Yeah.
When you ask
That would be
John,
important because there's no telling how much stuff we're missing because it's getting sent to a dead, an email box
Exactly.
that nobody has access to.
That email address is on the town website to contact us,
Yeah.
and there's no way to contact us. Nobody. Who knows? Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what's there. You never know. There could be. We might have won the lottery. One other project that we've kind of been having an eye on is this walkway between the village and Rhinecliff. And Alta Engineering has been hired by the town to do a feasibility study to see if there could be a walkway between the village, the train station, and the village. And they did their first phase of this feasibility study, which is basically to put out a whole bunch of different lines to give people like options. The one that makes the most sense is the shortest distance, Rhinecliff Road, boom. But they're going all over the place.
some
So
people
they
don't
recently had some Zoom meetings with landowners, adjacent landowners. That was their first part of the public outreach phase. So we're kind of moving into the next phase of this feasibility study.
I participated in
I
that.
saw you. I was there.
Yeah, and George,
on
you
this,
said that was a public meeting. I didn't see the invite or the announcement. Somehow you said there were going to be two, right?
That's correct. They had two.
It went to adjacent landowners. They didn't want to go out to the whole hole initially.
Okay.
They wanted to-
Yeah, Elizabeth did make very clear because there was a considerable chorus of discontent, predictably, from excuse me, from the suburbanites paranoid of any form of civilization peering into their windows.
Delinquents.
Um,
Their children to throw them into
but,
wells.
So Elizabeth made it quite clear that this was the very, very first crack at any kind of public outreach, and that there would be an enormous amount ongoing.
So it was you because you're neighboring property,
That's
but
correct.
also you were thinking the library should be.
Well, the library was invited.
Okay.
Stephen did send out an email. I don't know if
I
he
get it.
no. I'll have to check if he just sent it to me. My impression was that he had sent it to everyone, but then that's why I at our monthly meeting mentioned it again and did say if anybody hasn't gotten the link to get it from, ask Stephen again for it. But David Lavalley did participate as well.
Okay.
So there was 125 email or 125 mail invites that went out to adjacent property owners, and that probably did not cover everybody because I heard some complaints to people who thought they were adjacent to some of these options that were not notified.
Yeah, I mean, it was fairly obvious to the bulk of the people participating that there really was only one feasible route.
Is it
and
the
that-
2-track through the Creed Ankeny farm?
No, no, Rhinecliff Road
That's
was,
a straight shot.
yes, was the
Great
clear,
shot to where?
was the clear winner.
There's a 2-track that goes right through the middle of the farm. And most of that is the Creed Ankeny farm.
Yeah,
And it lets out right by Butcher Boys there in Rhinecliff.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that the entire project is really, in a sense, to cater to two specific groups. There are the residents of Rhinebeck who would benefit, as there is anyone getting off of Amtrak who's never been to Rhinebeck before and may want to set out on foot the 1.8 miles, or if down the road this should lead to some kind of bike sharing initiative or what have you.
Yeah.
There would be a means, excuse me again, by which they could do that. So if you are willing to, think outside your own community box and anticipate the desires of people who don't live in Rhinebeck but are taking Amtrak to get here, it makes absolutely no sense to funnel those people in a direct route to the hospital because there's no connection.
they're going.
There's no logical connection to the commercial heart of the village,
Yeah.
which is in theory why they are here.
Right.
So,
And it's approximately equivalent to getting off the train at Penn Station and walking to the United Nations. Which is,
right.
it's a walk,
Yes.
but it's not unrealistic.
Right.
well,
so-
the next phase will be the subway.
So there isn't. So there's an argument to be made that anyone living on that side of the village would benefit from being tethered by a means to walk or bike to Rhinecliff, but it doesn't really then, in effect, become an armature of a wider public transportation network.
Because it's connected to the road, or
Well, no, because if you, as I said, are coming up from New York City and have never been here before, you're going, if that bike route is funneling you all the way to the hospital, you're going to hoof it up Rhinecliff Road anyway.
oh my God, I thought that was like a euphemism for like people getting injured. I didn't realize it was actually going to the hospital.
Yes, those
The northern
alternate
Dutchess,
routes. Yeah, those
Yeah.
alternate
Yeah.
routes take you
Wow.
to the far other side of the village.
Train track right
No,
away.
yeah,
No,
that
it doesn't make
doesn't make
sense to me. What's the shortest distance between the train station and the light at the center of village? That's what they got to do, you know.
And I should also, sorry, I had I had chips and salsa at happy hour, and apparently I needed a
What's the
glass of
cocktail?
water. The other thing I would mention is that what seemed to be incongruous was, and to my surprise, they had rebranded the because it had an extremely awkward name. It was something like Trail to Station Feasibility
Mazzarelli,
Study or-
the train station to the Thompson Mazzarelli
Well,
Park.
but yeah, that's the important distinction. The initial email that I received never mentioned that it was a rail to park initiative, which is now how they've rebranded it, which in effect makes the other alternate routes then that much more illogical
It
because
didn't make
they,
sense.
they
Yeah.
circumvent the park.
And the alternate routes actually just created a lot of controversy because they drew the line right behind the Phase 3 gardens as one of the paths. And actually, they had two right-of-ways, two strips there that they could have put the line. And I told them during the draft phase, when it was still in draft, that they were referring to this rail like utility right-of-way, but they were showing it along Gardens property. And they're like, well, it could be either. Well, if they had put it on the utility right-of-way, it would have been farther from the Gardens property, and it might not have been as like scary to a lot of people who
Yeah.
who are afraid of this trail behind their property. But again,
And-
even
and
that
I-
strip didn't make sense going out to Astor Drive. That didn't make sense.
That's the old Hucklebush railroad right of way.
Yeah.
Historically, it was part of a railroad that went to Connecticut. But another way of looking at this is it would be from the train station to the fairgrounds, and that's a much farther walk. But if you're considering that to be the draw instead of the center of town, I think that would be a mistake. But it
Yeah.
might
'Cause
justify another route.
That renders it as much more of something seasonally viable rather than
Yeah.
1 week or a few weekends.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like every other weekend from May until October.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I-
I argued that should it go down Rhinecliff Road, it has great implications for all kinds of future park improvement endeavors that would benefit from it. I think I'm not an engineer, but I'm guessing they feel like they need to do some sort of due diligence should the village push back at some later date as it becomes ever more clear how expensive the Rhinecliff Road option is, because I think that perhaps more than any of the other routes would entail the most amount of infrastructure reconfiguring in order to make happen.
I think they're just trying to make it look like they're just trying to show that they looked at options.
Right. Yeah, because the biggest bill, ironically, if I'm correct about that, would come from the route that is seemingly the most direct. Because it's the one that has a bridge that is not currently, accommodating a shoulder. There would be utility poles that would need to be moved. I mean, they made some reference to the logistical challenges of it. There's a rocky outcropping. There's all, there's a lot of obstructions.
They could also combine it with the burying of the utilities, which is, sorely needed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now
And not a bad justification for opening up the right of way, because you take the utility poles out, you can use that right of way for a walkway. And then you're talking about, a footbridge or something like that, or, adding 20% to the existing highway bridge.
Right. I mean,
Might not be
certainly
prohibitive.
all of these financial decisions would have to be determined after they decide, or I guess they would decide to eliminate. I mean, they did mention it might ultimately just become a sidewalk and not include a bike path as well, because obviously that greatly increases the width, which greatly increases the necessity of moving utility poles and greatly increases the expense. So,
but it would also, if they put in sidewalks, it greatly increases the drainage cost, because now you have to have catch basins, because now you're collecting all the rain along a curb line.
Right.
So it's a big deal to put in sidewalks. But I found
engineer.
I attended both meetings, and I thought it was interesting, and I kind of gave a lot of the gardens a bit of pushback today, because I thought it was interesting, because a lot of this originated from the gardens. They formed the original group of trying to create a walkway, and really it's like the gardens wants a walkway to the village. That's that's their thing. They got me involved, and Nancy Richard, who used to be a CAB member, she was involved. She was talking how she was pushing the idea of the village to Rhinecliff, and that clicked with me. It's like the gardens to the village. It's like nobody cares about the gardens except the gardens. So, but if the Rhinecliff to the village, it's something that it's something that the whole community, it appeals to the whole town. So it was pushed. We pushed that actually. That they rebranded themselves instead of the Gardens Pathway Committee, they rebranded themselves the Rhinebeck Pathway Partners, and we lobbied for this concept of the pathway from the village to Rhinecliff. And such, we got Alta, and they're doing the study. But on the first set of meetings, there's just first of all, many of the gardens people were in opposition, because the phase 3 line, the one that went behind phase 3. So the first meeting, there was support from some people along Rhinecliff Road. That was nice to see. There was some families along Rhinecliff Road who were like, yeah, this is great. We really want this, because they're the ones who are the most impacted. But the strong opposition came from people in the gardens, and both potential pathways through the gardens. Oh, I don't want it to see in my backyard. I don't want to see it out my window. I don't want it. We don't want it. So, and then on the second meeting, it was both actually Rhinecliff Road opposition and the gardens opposition that I was hearing. But then when Yvonne, who was the chair of this Rhinebeck Pathway Partners, steps in, and Josh actually is like, oh, look, Yvonne wants to speak. They make room. She basically says, you know what? I don't really even care about what's down to the train station. I just want it to the gardens. Yeah. As long as you just do it in phases, just get it to the gardens. It's so, basically I thought it sent the message to everybody who was listening that, like, look, the gardens wants this free pathway for them, but they don't want it in their backyard. They just want it in everybody else's yard.
Yeah, well, we live in the era of the selfish individual.
So I pushed back on them today, actually. I'm like, look, you guys want it so bad for the gardens in the village. They own the property between the gardens and Astor Drive. And there's a parking lot there. It used to be a trailhead because phase 2 of the gardens put in paths, trails back there. I think Winnicke Land Trust at one point was going to take it over, but they never did. That trailhead is now just this parking lot for people, I guess, who work at the nursing home or work at the hospital or something. They just hang out there and they take their breaks. Mm. So I'm like, look, you guys,
that's where you go to smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're a nurse, you're not supposed to smoke.
If you want the trail, if you wanted something so safe to the village for the gardens, just walk across the gardens property, put your path in along gardens property to the trailhead that was there that the gardens did not maintain, and you're almost there. Boom, you're there.
Yeah, we looked at a house on Orchard Street, which is the other side of the hospital from the village. And it kind of backed up on the hospital parking lot. And we decided not to put an offer in on it or anything, because it would have been possible to walk through the hospital parking lot and get onto the sidewalk system and walk into town. But the hospital put up a huge fence there because all of the workers from the hospital have to leave the property to smoke.
Yeah.
So they were all walking through this fence and standing on the edge of the roadway there.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Smoking cigarettes.
So I think Josh Pulver is going to, after I was pushing back at the gardens, I was kind of pushing back on them today. I'm like, come on, you guys want it all. You want your cake and you want it too. You're the ones who want it, but you're the ones who complain you don't want it in your backyard and you want everybody to pay for it. But you have an easy solution right on gardens property to get you there so easily. So Josh Pulver suggested that we have a meeting because I was like kind of pushing on him. So maybe we'll see what that happens, because the bottom line is Alta is not changing their feasibility study. I just don't quite understand what they think. Like somehow if they think they can just switch courses. Oh, let's not push to the train station. We really just want to the gardens, and we can just, and I don't, Alta is going from the village to the train station. That's their scope. That's their feasibilities. And it's like either support it or don't, but to try to, you can't change it now. So that was that. The only other thing we could talk about unofficially is I did visit a house and did a report for a house that was on Old Post Road. It was kind of an interesting lot, 0.3 acres, just up from the Rhinebeck Kill. As you come down, that's Montgomery Street.
Montgomery, yeah.
To the bottom of the hill, there's the Rhinebeck Kill, and I guess on the other side of the Rhinebeck Kill, that's where Old Post Road begins. I didn't realize that that's where it begins. So they were like just the second house up on the right was a house. They ripped the house down. Isn't that interesting? They were, she's an architect. The applicant was an architect. And she was nice. Her husband was there. He was not very nice. It wasn't really very, very good. So he said the reason they ripped down the house was because Rhinebeck didn't do Zoom meetings during the beginning of the pandemic, and every other town did. And somehow the house got water in the foundation and this something, and because we could, the process shut down for a few months, they had to rip down the house. So like, whatever. I'm like, it was like 3 months, I think, that they didn't have meetings. 3 months.
Wow.
I mean, nobody can expect approvals to happen that quickly. So to me, that, you know, your project is that time sensitive that you're going to lose the house. It doesn't make sense to me. Obviously, they wanted to rip down the house.
I actually went and looked it up from the address, and I could see the house on Street View, and it looked like it was kind of an unremarkable mid-century ranch. Not really anything of any particular style or
All my research on the lot showed that there was nothing really there. Habitat was considered developed area. Like most of the wetland was the side. There was a little bit of floodplain that kind of encroached just on the southern side of southwest corner of the property. But like there was already a house there, so it's not like putting another house is going to change the floodplain. That's not, you're not changing the dynamic of the lot by putting another house there. And they need to get a variance from the ZBA because it's a non-conforming lot. It's a RA10 zoning districts, and it's 0.3 acres. It's a non-conforming pre-existing lot. So, but I looked at the plans. Basically I'm like, I didn't see impact and impact, but what I put at the end, and I mentioned it to them when I left. And by the way, it's they're putting in a contemporary house on a scenic road, among other very traditional homes that, like I just said, should grant it some consideration. They should look into that, whether they think would blend in properly.
Well, it should really match in scale and character.
It doesn't match
the surroundings,
and it didn't match the character.
It is a scenic road, and there's you can make objections about, I don't like the style of house you're building elsewhere in the village or elsewhere in town, and unless you're in a historic district, it doesn't matter unless you happen to be on a state scenic road, and there are protections for that. And I was glad that you identified that resource, and I hope that planning board takes that, or the zoning board takes that to heart.
That wasn't a state scenic road; it was a local scenic road. That's what based on our listing, but still, I think that has some sort of significance. So I just called it out. But what I thought was the bigger call, and they were giving me pushback, because I wasn't looking to cause any trouble with these people, but the guy was just like, "You guys don't know what it costs. All this stuff, you just don't know what it costs." It's like, come on, you build a house in Rhinebeck, you better freaking know what it costs. Come on. You're complaining about, so they have an existing septic system. The site plan just shows their house and assumed location. It says assumed location of septic system on the site plan, assumed location. I'm like, so I'm asking them, like, what is this assumed location? They're like, oh, it's right there. So because they had already demolished the house, and they're part of where the foundation was kind of a hole, and you could see at one end of the hole the tank for the septic with a pipe coming out. Oh, that's the septic tank. I'm like, well, what's the deal with that? Like, where's the absorption field, or where does it go? What is it, a cesspool? What is this? Ooh, we don't know. I'm like, well, you ripped down the house and now you're putting it in a new house. If you hadn't ripped down the house, probably nobody would think twice about this septic system. But now you're putting in a new house. Don't you think you should know whether the system is up to the task of a new house? And by the way, it's just uphill of the Rhinebeck Hill. That old system could have been failing for who knows how long. I don't know. So that was my recommendation. I say it subtly. I don't have to hit them hard. I just call it out that they should know that the applicant should provide the size, type, location, and proof of function of the septic system. That's all done. I don't have to
Is
say
that a
anything.
local policy that Rhinebeck has, that they have to do that?
I would think, well, first, the planning board, I wouldn't, I can't imagine why they would allow a new house to be built without proof of your septic system working.
I had significant county oversight of my septic redo.
Yeah, and if you add a bathroom, you got to prove that your septic system can handle that. And I don't know that they're adding a bathroom, but they ripped down a house, and we don't know what the status of the old system was that they ripped down this house of. And again, they're going to build.
They wouldn't be the first people to, tear down a 2-bedroom house and build a much bigger house with many more rooms and say, oh, it's still a 2-bedroom.
Right.
2-bedroom and 9 baths, and everybody's got their own den, and the county's kind of wise to that. And I think that they make them designed to 100% beyond their absorption capacity.
I was going to say, in addition to that, if your lot is, my understanding is that if your lot is large enough to accommodate a theoretical backup plan, you will be paying an engineer to design that for you in addition to the one that will actually be built.
Yeah.
0.38 acres.
The other thing is too, this is not
Depending on their
They made a big mistake. They made a big mistake by ripping that house down, if you ask me. Because now that septic system is, I think, should be scrutinized. But again, we're advisory, and I just call it out, and I put it under general findings. That wasn't CAB finding. That was just general finding. Septic system, septic system. They should know.
You're intersecting with my my line of work. We look for poop in the water, so I'm really. And I was going to say too, in Kingston, we're working on trying to. Bolton and Queensbury have septic inspection programs that kick in when a house is sold. So basically, before there can be a transference of the property, there needs to be the building inspector comes by to basically inspect the septic system, and then the property can be sold. So we're trying to explore what it would look like to get one of those in Kingston, because even though there's a sewer system, there are a few homes. I think there's like 120 or so homes that still have septic. But it could be similar. Like if you guys are interested in something like that, I don't know if you all propose legislation to the town board, but that could be a project to work on.
I think there are a lot of people in this village who would like to sell their houses someday for a lot of money, and
Don't want to
probably
get
are there's not a lot of room to come into compliance.
Yeah.
I might be one of them.
Well, most
I got a half an acre. Nice level half acre.
a lot of the village is served by a sewer system, so they're all
Yeah.
set. But
Yeah, and in
they're
fact,
on the other side of the creek.
that location, they might end up paying for a forced main because it's
Oh,
not
they
that
would.
far, but they're
really?
they're definitely uphill, or it would have to go uphill to get
It's
to.
pretty far. I mean, it's uphill all the way to Astor Drive
Yeah,
and then down. Yeah, I don't know where obviously it goes to the hospital.
goes to the hospital.
I
Yeah,
don't know how much farther it goes beyond the hospital.
that would be an interesting map to have, is the map of the village's septic sewer coverage, because that, and we did a project about 6 months ago. I keep coming back to it. It's a mobile home park on Route 9, just north of Williams Lumber, and they had a septic disposal system that was encroaching on the neighbor, and so they made some changes. They said the changes were just repairs, and they had an SPDES permit, and we had to issue them a wetlands permit, and they were just changing their point of discharge from one location to another location farther downstream. But I think it brought to light a number of issues, and one of them is this issue of compliance. Because if you make changes, if you make alterations, then you have to bring your whole system into compliance. But if you make repairs, then you're fine just kind of patching together the system that you have. And it was clear the Board of Health was not interested in getting into any kind of depth with this owner. But there were just a number of things like sanitary lines passing within 10 feet of the wellhead, for the property. A lot of stuff that just didn't really look kosher, but they didn't have to pull a permit for it because it was a repair. And that's one location that would have been ideal for making use of the village sewage disposal plant. And as Mark pointed out, it all goes back into the Rhinebeck Kill anyhow. However, it's subject to daily monitoring by, qualified individuals who have, they're tasked with making sure that they're not, discharging nasty stuff into the waters.
As far as the mapping, I could ask Vanessa Bertozzi if she would want to include that a village, because we're doing an NRI. And this is our time to get any mapping done that we want to get done, because we got this GIS lab that can like freaking put everything we have into GIS. So we want to get it all GIS, everything we can. But so Vanessa Bertozzi is working, cooperating or coordinating with us. She representing the village, and I could see if she wanted to include that. If they have that, they should have that. You would hope mapping.
What body does she represent in the village?
She's a what do they call it? A trustee.
Okay, but they don't have an equivalent board. They don't have like an equivalent conservation advisory board in the village, do they?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
Yeah,
but
and that's another peculiarity is that you've got the village is within the town, but the village and town are separate.
You got to get over that, Craig. You got to get used to that. That's just the way it is. It's always
just kind of weird.
It's not that weird.
It's not necessary, and until incumbents are no longer there, you're not going to be able to merge municipalities.
Like the city of Poughkeepsie and the town of Poughkeepsie.
That's a fight that can't be won, so they leave it. Same situation. In Millbrook, they were able to combine the justice courts, but they were not able to combine the municipalities. So they tried, and they're trying both directions here in Rhinebeck. And the justice courts, that became an explosive problem, and that's not going to happen easily.
They're not combining them?
Not till Willie Sanchez retires.
I'll tell you what, don't ever get a ticket from a state trooper in the village. Don't ever do it. Because if you go to the village court, they don't let in a prosecutor. The prosecutor is the state trooper. And he tells you, I can't plea bargain. So, but usually the prosecutor is the one who plea bargains. So if you get a ticket in the village from the state trooper, you're screwed, because
Mark, why are you racing through town? Why are you racing through the village?
I wasn't. I tell you, it was his radar was wrong. He picked somebody else.
Yeah, but if you get pulled over by a local Rhinebeck police officer,
that's cool.
They and Willie will cut you a break if you're polite and you don't cause trouble.
Oh my God! Don't ever get Officer Burley, state trooper, because he will never miss a court hearing. Everybody else out at the week of the 4th of July, all the state troopers didn't show up to court except for Officer Burley. Dismissed, except for Officer Burley.
If you're pulled over by a state trooper, you want to negotiate with that officer the second you roll down your window.
Well, in the village, never had an issue.
Yeah, it's the state troopers they try to not pull you over in the village because they don't want to be bothered. But about 10 years ago, the governor of the time told the state police that you're not going to be able to plea bargain anymore, because for one and only one reason, they didn't want to pay state troopers overtime to go to court once a month. So the state troopers, the colonel of the state troopers at the time basically was like, oh, you're going to take that much money away from all my guys? Well, we're not helping you in any way, shape, or form. The ticket is the ticket from now on.
Well, the prosecutor would plea bargain.
They would allow a prosecutor, but then, often, what do you want to wait for DA night? It's not every.
Oh, it always worked before. Ugh.
It works fine.
But anyway, the village and the town do seem to be trying to coordinate more and more with different things, just as we are in the NRI project. So that should make you feel good, Craig.
I'm glad that I have no personal experience to add to these.
Just wait. Oh man, I'm telling you, when you hit that 30-mile-an-hour traffic, when you see 30-mile-an-hour speed limit,
I moved to Rhinebeck so that I don't need to be in a car. So
you're good.
I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we kind of reached the peak of an unofficial meeting to
Yeah.
keep Fred and Sebastian hanging. So
Yeah, I had one thing to say. I know Joe Kupiak had joined me